In some cases has to lose friends or lose family before they come towards being religious. We find that within the Quran, Allah tells us the story of Prophet Adam, or the story of Prophet Nuh, or the stories which come and show us what? They show us that a father may be religious, but the sons may not necessarily be religious. Adam's son was doomed. Nuh's son was doomed. If it was religiosity that was inherited, then they would have been like their fathers. But religiosity as well, and the idea of some is inherited, whereas in the religion of Islam, no. And that's why we find that the main area when you look at the word inheritance in Arabic, the word inheritance in Arabic is what? Mirath. And therefore, when you look at the word mirath in Arabic, you find not only within Arabic circles, but also within English grammar, that when you look at the word inheritance, you find that it always relates to wealth. When we discuss inheritance and we discuss the bequeathing of a property from one person to another, we discuss it in terms of wealth being passed from one place to another. That's why ulama of usul, when they discuss inheritance, there is a principle in usul called al-istishab al-raj'i. Al-istishab al-raj'i dictates that you look at the usage of a word according to its time. So when we look at the word inheritance in the time of Rasulullah, the word inheritance in the time of Rasulullah was related to wealth. When they would speak about mirath, they wouldn't speak about knowledge, they wouldn't speak about religion, they would speak about wealth. You are inheriting a form of wealth, be it a house, be it an estate, be it a piece of furniture. Why do the ulama focus on the usage of the word? Because when they look at a verse in the Quran and they see the word wawaritha, for example, or they see the word yarithuni wa yarithu min al Yaqub, they look at the word yarithu and they have to understand what was the usage of that word in Arabia. Therefore, when you look at this concept, you find inheritance has a number of angles. And therefore, in the discussion of inheritance, when one looks at it in depth, before looking at the Quranic usage of inheritance, a person has to look at how inheritance was spread before Islam. Why? Because there is no way I will appreciate the Islamic law of inheritance unless I have looked at how ridiculous some of the laws of inheritance were before Islam. And that's why when you examine some of the books that have been written about the so-called great empires before Islam, you find that they did not show any concern for the female when it came to inheritance. For example, Sa'id Nafisi writes in his book, Sa'id Nafisi is an Iranian author, he had written a book about the Sassanids. And he had written a book about the Sassanid Empire from their social history up to Bani Umayyah. And in this book he writes that within the Sassanid Empire, inheritance was used in which way? A father would do what? He would inherit the wife to his son. A female couldn't inherit. Rather, she was inherited. A female could not inherit. She was inherited. The father would come to his son maybe reached the age of puberty, 15 and onwards, let's just say, and he would say to him, any of my wives are now yours. If you want them, you can have them. And if I am deceased, then the widows which I have left are your property. This was a reflection of Arabia. In Arabia, the Arabs, the fathers would come and you would find that there would be an inheritance of the wives. The son would come and he would simply throw his garments. It was a symbol. You would throw your garments on the Arabian female. The lady used to be your father's wife, as in like one of his wives. And so now she became your wife. Why? Because as part of the inheritance in Arabia, what used to happen was that the female used to be inherited. If she was no use to you, she could be of use to your son. Your son could either have her as his wife, or the son could go on and sell her. Why did the Arabians have such a philosophy about the female? The Arabians had a philosophy like this because they said the female is of no military use. And because she is of no military use, then there is no point inheritance being prepared for her. And the idea that they used to say, if she was helpful in war, in the battlefield, then you can understand her receiving a stipend of wealth. But she doesn't do anything for us in war. That's why you find the verse in the Quran, in Surah 4, verse number 7, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this verse about the brother of Hassan ibn Thabit. Hassan ibn Thabit was one of the great poets of Arabia. His brother had passed away. His brother had left a wife and some daughters. In Arabia, the daughter had no role in female, and in Arabia, the wife as well was in the same position. She could not inherit. And so what happened was the first cousins, who were next in line in inheritance, the first cousins came, they inherited all the wealth. The wives of the brother of Hassan bin Thabit went to Rasulullah. They said, Ya Rasulullah, here is a case where our husband has died. There is no wealth left for us whatsoever. He's left behind a wife and he's left behind some daughters. Surely there has to be a case that there is wealth given to us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the verse that for men there is a share of the inheritance, and for the female there is a share of the inheritance. And the idea that when Rasulullah discussed with the cousin, he said, what's the problem with the female? Why is it that you don't allow her to inherit? The reply was, because she's of no use in war. If she was useful, we'd let her have some money. But what's she going to do for us? Indeed, it's ironic that in the Battle of Uhud, it took a female to defend Rasulullah while others were running away. Here on this point we find that the Arabians used to come forward and say that she was of no military use. And because she was of no military use, in their period of Jahiliyyah, she could not inherit. Indeed, this was only one of the features of Arabia's Jahiliyyah with the female. Arabia used to show oppression to the female of an unprecedented standard. Let me give you two examples from the second Khalifa, in order to you understand oppression of the female, just in case some of you had doubts about the history of his later action. One of his actions was that he had come forward. He says, there was a period in my life, and we narrated the story earlier, there was a period in my life which I remember it. When I remember it, I used to laugh. And there's another period when I remember it, I cry. So they said to us, what is it? He said, I used to laugh a lot when I remember that we used to worship dates, an idol made of dates. Okay? And so what he used to say is that this idol made of dates, we'd all worship it. But then, you know, when we're hungry, we take a date and eat it. Until eventually God passes away. Because if you think about it, if every guy has a crack and takes the date, then what happens is this Christmas tree looking idol, by the end of the Ramadan feast, for example, there's no more God there. So he says, I used to remember this and I used to smile. He says, but then there was something which used to make me cry. And that was when I remembered how I buried my daughter alive. The Arabians used to say, because she's of no military value, she shouldn't inherit and she should be buried alive. He said, I remember that when I was burying her alive, she had put forward her hand in a way which, you know, a baby is an instinct. A baby does things instinctively, but it may affect you. She has put forward the hand like this, and I felt sorry. Did it stop me? No, I continued killing her. The second thing that he did, and shows you the oppression against the female, was when he found out his sister Fatima had converted to Islam. And his famous story of his conversion, he converted upon hearing the words of the Quran, and upon hearing the words of the Quran, of course, he went to Rasulullah and went to convert. But the one part of that incident which they don't normally narrate is how he slapped his sister. Within him was a tendency against not only the young female, but the older one, that he slapped his sister when he found out that she had converted to Islam. This was part of those in Jahiliyyah, that they used to show this type of attitude towards the female. The Quran says in Surah 16 that their faces become black when they are given news that a female is born to them. Their faces become black, and the idea that their faces, they used to become angry when they used to hear that a female was born to them. Arabia had these ways in terms of inheritance, and that's why it was called the period of Jahiliyyah, because they did not recognize the position of the female when it came to inheritance. Instead, they would give their adopted son more rights of inheritance than their daughter. Imagine, you adopt a son, and you've got a daughter. Who deserves the inheritance more? The one you've adopted from another family, with all due respect to where he has come from, or a daughter who was born to you naturally? Who is the one who deserves the inheritance? They used to treat their adopted son like their real son. And so the adopted son would get the inheritance of the father, whereas the daughter, who the father has seen blossom and grow, would receive nothing of the inheritance.